Hey, what's going on? Welcome to ngAir. I'm your host, Justin Schwarzenberger. And on today's episode, we are going to talk about profiling and monitoring web apps. Should be pretty exciting. Always awesome to kind of learn some tips and tricks and ways we can see how we can get our apps running better and diagnose our code and figure that all out. So let's get into it. We'll say hi to our panelists, and then we'll meet our guest, and then we'll get into the content. Joining us today, we have Bonnie. Bonnie, what's going on?
Whole lot of that. I'm very excited about the show today. Whatever time zone you're in, I'm excited.
Whenever you're
I'm not
watching
going to give it away.
All right. Oh yeah, I forgot. Like I gotta do you last, right?
I know you never know when I'm going to spoil it.
It's been a minute. Okay, but I guess
I'm
everything's
doing
just
well today.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm not spoiling anything. It's going to be a great show.
Awesome. Mike, what's going on, Mike?
I forgot how to unmute myself. It's been a while. I feel like it's been like a month. I feel like we haven't done a show since like September, October. And here it is, almost the holidays, almost the new year. And I'm excited to be back, excited to be chatting again.
Yes.
You look really good today, Mike. You look like you've been outside running or something.
You know, I decided to shower. I did that. I did my hair.
I'm so proud of you. Thank you.
I'm like doing all the things.
You smell great too.
I am adulting today.
That's good. We have at least one good-looking person on the show today. So one respectable person. That's good.
And we haven't even gotten to the guest yet.
I know. But our other panelist, Alyssa, how's it going?
Hello, darlings. I have some apple cider to really enjoy this holiday episode. I'm making it a holiday episode, whether or not you all feel festive. So,
I'm so glad you're here, Alyssa.
So that sounds good. Good.
I'm gonna step away here in a minute because I think I'm gonna go get some eggnog after hearing that. If it's a holiday episode, I need me some eggnog.
Oh yeah.
All right. Bring some for all of us, and bring some for our guest. Our guest joining us today is Gil. Gil, how's it going?
Cool. From Israel. Everything is fine here. I'm just taking Alisa's advice and just putting some bottle of water right now on the table. I raise you by 2 bottles of water.
There you go. I've got some water too, so there's 2 of us that have water now, so that's good.
Hey, I have a whole bucket of water.
Whoa!
Wow, you got like it's like a decanter for your water.
This is a weird thing because in America we have big cups. Everybody's got like a gallon jug with their cup, and then they have these little tiny cups in Europe, and it's like, what am I even supposed to do with that? Well, it's because they keep these things. I don't know. Apparently, that's how they do it here.
I want to be fancy, and I want to call it a carafe.
Yes. Hey, speaking of fancy, Gil, you're in Israel. Hey, do you know our friend Shai Resnick?
I know how to find Shai Resnick. He's something like 6 kilometers from here in his home right now with his kids and family and having fun, probably.
All right, then hold on. This is a challenge to Shai. If you're watching right now, get on your horse. You've got 6 kilometers to get to Gil's place. We want to see you on Gil's cam before the end of the episode.
And preferably, we'd like to see the horse as well.
Did you tell Shai that you were coming on the show?
Didn't tell him.
Will you do us a favor after the show or next time you see him? Just go give him a big old hug and a kiss from us and tell him that
we'll do that.
We haven't seen Shai Resnick in a long time and we love him.
I will do that.
I mean, I saw him this morning, but
we can't all be.
All right. Well, now since Shai's made an appearance on the show, whether audibly or actually visually, we've mentioned Shai. So that's good. Gil, how's it going, Gil? Why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so if you don't know me, I'm Gil Fink. I'm the CEO of Sparksys. We only have 1 employee, myself. So it's very easy to me to say that I'm the CEO. I'm doing consulting in web development around from 2002. It's 17 years already. Traveling all around the world and doing sessions and talks about things that I like, things that I don't like, things that I would like that people will like, and things like that. Wrote a book did a few gigs with Microsoft, wrote some Microsoft official courses, a Microsoft MVP and GDE. The usual.
I didn't
Nice.
know you had all that stuff. I'm gonna have to start being nicer to you.
I think that
Don't
the
forget
best.
to tell them you have a beautiful family. I don't know if you're gonna show me
Yeah.
a picture of your family. But I know
So
your family
I don't have a picture right now, but I wanted to save the best to the last. So the best title that I have is Dad and Husband, and I really, really, really love my family, and hopefully my kids won't be here showing in the show tonight.
How many kids do you have?
It might happen. I have 3 kids, and they are old, not like your kid, Alisa.
How old? Like 20s?
No, I'm not such an old guy, but it's
No, you said old. I'm like, they're babies until they're about 19. So.
my biggest kid is 13, so he has his bar mitzvah in 7 months, and we will visit the US to take him to a trip.
Gil was telling us before the show his wife's not home, and so he had to threaten the children to make sure that they didn't come and interrupt him during the show today.
I don't say threatening, I said briefing.
Well, if they do show up, we'll welcome them with open arms, and they can talk to us about some profiling stuff. So that'd be fine.
They can talk about games and things like that.
There you go.
Better than profiling.
Well, there you go. You can talk about like how this game feels sluggish here or there, and that kind of relates to the same sort of thing, right? So
that's something.
Yeah. So I'm excited about the fact that you mentioned that you've been doing the web development stuff and in the web space since like 2002. Because when we talk about like profiling and monitoring, there's a lot of stuff, I'm sure, in terms of tooling and things that we can identify, but there's also all of that years of experience of things that you've hit and run into, right? That you can that helps in that facet of debugging things that we can say, oh, I remember that scenario or this thing, or had to go through this architecture, and that could be causing this particular problem, right? So,
yeah. There are a lot of things that can cause problems, and we will probably talk about a few of them or ideas of how to find them during this conversation.
Nice. And so we're going to talk about the profiling and monitoring techniques for web apps, not specific for Angular, for kind of anything. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's awesome. Correct, because when you're doing profiling sessions, the tech isn't something that you need. You need to consider it because it's an overload, it's an abstraction that you are using, but you are not testing or profiling Angular. You are profiling your code. Angular is just the tool that you created your website. So we will see demos in Angular, but I could have rewritten all those demos in any other frameworks, React, Vue, whatever, and use those kind of demos in other places, not in ngAir.
Awesome. So we get to level up our web development skills, right, in this particular episode. That's very cool.
Hopefully. One thing that always directs me when I'm giving a talk is if somebody learned something new, then I'm happy. If there are people who didn't learn something new during my talks, then I think that I need to quit.
Well, we don't want you to quit, but it's about that identifying. You at least have one thing, right? One thing. I think that's one of the challenges with presenting talks or figuring things out is you kind of want to. You don't know your audience; it's going to be widespread, right? And so you kind of, as you cover your material, have a little bit of something that at least somebody from every different aspect could take away at least one little thing. you feel that's what I feel success with,
Well,
right?
and I
So-
think we're so used to like being in it and, presenting or just being on the cutting edge of what's coming out that we take for granted what people know and what they don't know. I was really surprised by the last talk I gave. I like intermittently sprinkled, well, how many of you have heard of this? And like 3 people out of 80 like raised their hand. And I was like, wow, like I'm actually teaching new things. This is incredible, because to me it was like old news. And so it's kind of disheartening. So I think maybe sometimes we get too much in our own heads about, oh, everybody knows this, I don't have anything to offer. So
Yeah, and this is why I started to give talks about profiling, because nobody does that on daily basis. So some of the things that you tackle there can give you a lot of insights about how to do things better later on. So if you know how to profile and you add profiling cycles inside your development cycles, then you might be your apps will be better performing, and you will have better understanding of how things work. And this is something that we will probably talk later on. So if you want to get started, and I will share my screen, and I will try to explain some things, and hopefully we will all learn something together, not only me.
yeah, sounds good. Let's do it.
So
Let's rock and roll. I'm
let
ready.
me know when I'm sharing the screen. When I'm sharing currently.
All right.
Yeah.
Yep, we got it.
Yep. So what I'm going to talk about, and stop me if you don't understand something or you want to ask something, is we will talk about a few things. First of all, what is the pixel pipeline, or how browser renders web pages? And the idea is that once you understand how the pipeline is working, you can tackle problems in your code later on. So this is something that is like opening the hood of the browser, but we won't drill down very deeply. We won't talk about the engine or anything else. But we'll talk about the following. Refresh rates. So the browsers that we are using aren't working out of the blue from they're working inside devices. The devices can be mobile and tablets and laptops or whatever, and each and every device has a refresh rate which says 60 times a second, 60 frames per second, and that means that we have something like 16 milliseconds to ship a frame to the screen. But in reality, it's like 10 milliseconds, because browser have overhead of management overhead. So once you have once you hit the 60 frames per second, you are good. Your performance of the web page will be good, and you can see that jumping person on the right, which is having much more fun than the two on the left with 30 and 15 frames per second. So why I'm talking about this? Because we want to ship each and every frame in less than 10 milliseconds, and this means that we need to pass something that is called the pixel pipeline. So what is the pixel pipeline? It's the process that a browser is doing when it wants to print something or paint something to the screen. So this process is like has 5 steps, and let's talk about those steps. So first of all, JavaScript, the language that we love and write and everything. So JavaScript is handling, or you are doing some interaction with the users, and something is happening in the web page. As a result, there is a visual change, and this is all the things that the step of the JavaScript is doing. For example, if you have some CSS animation, CSS transition, web animation API, and etc., those things are going to be in this step. They are going to be calculated in this step, and we will move forward to the next step. So the next step is style. The browser tries to figure out by the CSS rules that were provided by us how it should write or apply those the CSS on the elements. And each and every style is calculated to each and every element. This is something that can take some time, but it's running. It is something that can or running, not very fast, but fast enough for us. The third step is layout, and this is the step. And when I'm saying this is the step, it's really the major step. And the browser calculates the space that it needs for each and every element, and then it positions that element in the page. It creates the entire layout according to the box model, the web layout model. Elements are written from left to right, from up to down, and according to all the styles that were applied previously. So this is a major step. This is like the big bottleneck of performance when things are happening. We'll talk about it in a minute. Fourth step is paint. And this is when the browser paints all the pixel on the screen. That means all the text, the colors, the images, and etc. that we are seeing on the screen. All the visual parts are painted to the screen. This process also takes some time. And last but not least, composite. The browser will draw the element according to their layer. Have you ever used Z-index? Probably yes, but
Probably used it poorly.
yeah.
I have.
No,
yes.
it's not poorly, but this is when we're using Z-index, for example, this is causing the composite to ship things layer on top of another layer, and this is why this step is very crucial, because once we have layout and positioning, then we need to figure out how to position each and every layer that the browser created. And this part is running on the GPU. All the previous parts are running on the computer's CPU. So the GPU is supposed to be very fast, and this step is very fast. So what's the big idea here, and why I'm showing you this entire process? Because we have two things that we need to consider every time that we are changing something in the application UI. This is reflows and repaints. Let's talk about reflows. So reflow is a process that the browser will run in each and every change of the layout. Meaning that if I did DOM manipulation, added an element, removed an element, or things like that, the browser might trigger a reflow process, and in the reflow process, the entire pixel pipeline is going to run for from all the steps, meaning JavaScript, style, layout, paint, composite, and etc., etc. That means that this process is very, very expensive in terms of performance, and we should minimize the touching of the DOM. And this is why virtual DOM in React or in Vue became very popular, because they try to minimize the effects of reflows. Repaints is when some visual change doesn't require the calculation of the entire layout. For example, you change some text color or visibility of an element or things like that, the browser doesn't need to calculate the entire layout. Then it will run all the process of the pixel pipeline, but without the part of the layout. And reflows and repaints, We talked about my kids. My dad says they are very expensive or too expensive. Yeah, they are very expensive, and there are the bottlenecks of each and every performance problems that you'll probably get to see. And there is a third thing that might happen, and it's changes that do not affect the layout or painting. And for example, you have some timer that runs and doesn't touch the DOM or things like that, then not the entire process will run, but only JavaScript style and composite, and that's all. And when we are talking about performance tuning, we mostly talk about the Rail model. In Rail model, the user, it's a model that was created by Google. It's talking about the rule of thumbs to make the app performant in the eyes of your users. So the Rail is like response, each and every response to events and things that happen in the screen should take under 50 milliseconds. Animation should be, each and every frame should be produced under 10 milliseconds. We now understand why it's under 10 milliseconds, because otherwise we'll lose frames and the page frame per second won't be very good, and the performance will be bad. Idle, maximize the idle time. If your app shouldn't do anything, don't do anything. It's like saying be lazy. And loading, load of a web page should take under 5 seconds, or else your users will go away to your competition. So now, after we understand the things that we might want to tackle, we're ready to profile. Any questions by now?
Nope.
No, man, I want to profile some stuff.
Okay, let's profile. So when we want to profile something, your best friend is going to be the DevTools. In this picture, we can see the Chrome DevTools. I love Chrome DevTools, but there are other very great performance tooling in Edge and in Firefox, so you don't have to just use Chrome for profiling and to find the performance. So let's try to go and do something interesting. Oh, an Angular app. So I created an Angular app that is going to do the following. It's just going to put some very nice circles with colors on the screen. And I can tell you that there is a problem in this web page, a performance problem. Even if I refresh it, and it takes it's like Zoom. I refreshed the page and you didn't see anything. But there is a performance problem here. So let's try to understand what is the process of profiling and how we do that. So we can see that I'm currently in incognito mode. I will talk about why I'm in incognito later on. And what I'm going to do is open the DevTools. So let's open the DevTools. And in the Chrome DevTools, we have the Performance tab. And you can see that I can start a recording right now or reload the entire web page. And this is what I'm going to do. Reload the page. And once it will finish, I will stop the profiling and something that when you see it the first time, it's like frightening. What is this timeline? What is going on here? So don't be afraid. This is where we're trying to understand how to see the problems that I'm talking about that we have in the page. So first of all, we have this big timeline, and you can see here a hint that something is not working very well. If you see red squares or small red squares, that means that something is wrong in your web page and you should start doing profiling. So we can see here that the task took some 5 seconds. It took 5 seconds because we had overhead of the Chrome DevTools. And I can tell you that the problem that we have in the page is around here. And let's try to understand what is the problem, or let's try to understand how I profile this web page. And what we are going to see is we'll open the bottom up tab here, and we can see here that we have the total time, all the things that happened. We can see that Zone.js took a lot of time, but this is something that we can't change, and core as well. But if we will drill down, the things that you need to search for are your code. For example, I can see that color component host ngFactory.js takes 84% of the total time. So there is probably a problem in color component. And I can press here the code, and I can see that app color it took something like it took more than that, but so there is problem here in color component, and I can see that the problem is probably going to be here around color.component.ts. Let's press it, and we can see here that the ngInit here took a lot of time. So let's jump into the code and let's see what's the problem here. So I'm a very regular developer, and I went to the internet, and I took some function that I saw called decimal to x, and I copy it into my source code, and then I used it to set the background of each and every circle. So what's the problem here? This is a question for all the panelists. Let's go back and let's see the things that took a lot of time.
Well, first of all, it doesn't make you an okay developer for copy and pasting code. That's something called resourcefulness. You're being resourceful and you're finding things to help you.
Yeah. This is the big problem.
I think the big problem is that we're doing styles in JavaScript.
Yeah, it's a problem. It's a problem, but I wanted to
get philosophical on us.
Yeah, I'm talking about things.
That's not the solution.
Okay, but let's see. This line of code took a lot of time. You can see here that it took something like 2.8 seconds. And it took so much time because decimal to x is being called many, many times. In each and every ngInit, we can see here that we call it for console log, and we call it here 3 times to get the color. And for each and every circle on the screen, we call the ngInit function. So we have a lot of things here that happening. Yes?
So, sorry. So this component is used to draw each one of those color circles. So if there's 200 color circles, there's 200 instances of this color component. Is that what you're saying, right?
Yeah, but this is, again, not the problem. The problem here is, because I wanted to show a color palette, is that, first of all, you don't want to have console logs in your code. Now, that's not a problem, but don't ship console logs to production. You can see that a lot of the time that we had here is in the console logs. But the problem here is really this line of code. Because you can see here that we got input, the red, blue, and green as numbers, and I'm taking those numbers and I'm just producing some hexadecimal color. And we could have used RGB as the solution for the things that we're doing here. Okay, this is how you can solve the problem of using a lot of these. You don't need to use this decimal to hex function at all. Okay, I started by saying that I went to the internet and I copied some function that I thought that it's cool, but it wasn't cool because I didn't need it. And this is something that we're doing from time to time as developers, not the copy paste, but rather writing some code that looks cool but can create very big performance problems later on, because we don't know how people will use our our code. So another idea to write the background color was to use, CSS RGB. We already have the red, green, and blue as inputs to our control, to our component. And we could have used that knowledge and just write something like this. And if I'll run this up again, and I will close this, and it refreshed. I'll open the developer tools again. I'll run the profiling again, and let's see if it's working as expected. Then now, if I will go to the bottom up, we'll still see the color control component, but it won't show us that there is a performance problem in the ngInit function. You can see that I'm scrolling. I don't see the ngInit of the color component, and we solved the problem. Okay, so what was the idea of this demo? The idea of this demo was to show you, or to explain how you process or how you do a profiling for the app. So let's start to understand the process itself. So first of all, we establish a baseline. You saw me opening the app in incognito mode. The idea is that no extensions or anything else in the browser will interfere in the processing of the profiling. More than that, you can create a new branch for profiling, or put a label or something like that to establish the baseline for your inquiry. Then you collect the data. I opened the developer tools and I started to collect the data that I wanted to collect. Meaning, right now it was to reload the web page again, because I thought that I have a problem in the loading of the page, and there was a problem in the loading of the page. Then once the profiling stops, you get this very frightening timeline. But as I said, after a few times that you do the entire process, it won't be frightening anymore. So then there are a lot of things that are inside of it and we won't touch it, but these things can also help you to profile the app. Then you analyze the results that you get and you make assumptions. What's the problem? If you get the assumption right, you tune up the app and you check again, test and measure again the entire code that you wrote, meaning that you run the profiling again and check if you resolved the performance problem. If you didn't resolve the performance problem, you will continue in this loop of collecting data, analyzing, tuning up, and testing and measuring. This is the profiling process, and this is a process that I urge every developer or every company to add inside the in the performance, not in the development cycles that we have. You can add it to your sprints and to all the things that you are doing right now. So with that in mind, let's jump back to this app that I wrote, and let's move to a different tab here, Movies tab, and let's do the profiling together. So this is the time that you panelists in ngAir will help me to do the profiling. Who wants to be
Careful what you wish
first?
for, Gil.
I love this content, by the way. Makes my heart really happy.
Okay, so
I'm on board. I'll go first.
yeah, okay. So I will do something in the web page to make you understand what's the problem. I'm pressing a button, and it takes some time up until this title here is refreshing.
Press
And
it,
I want to
Gil.
understand why is
Press
that?
it. Press it.
What? I
Press it.
pressed it.
Press it again.
Okay, so it takes some time, and it's not refreshing very fast as I wanted it to refresh. So
So it's
what
just like
the-
flipping through movie
What the heck's
title
going on here, Mike?
numbers.
okay,
What did you
so
do, Mike?
I think it's changing the title at the top, right? Movie 7.
yeah, this is changing.
Okay.
Okay, I'm adding a random number to the title, and it takes some time.
Yeah, the performance there seems a little bit off to change the title using a random number.
Yeah, I know.
Well, no, because I mean that's the first step, right? Is identifying that there's an issue.
Yeah, this is the first step. Identify that you have an issue. So I gave you the issue, and now what we're going to do is press
Justin gave
F12.
us the issue, Gil. Justin gave us the answer as usual. Justin always gives us the answer. That's why
Okay,
he's in
so
charge
we
of
will
the
wait.
answer.
We will wait to Justin. So I will start the profiling. Okay, and I will press the button again, and hopefully it will change somewhere in the future. Think about it. There is an overhead of running. Okay, it changed. Woohoo! And I'm going to stop it, and then currently we get something here. So what's the next step? What do you want
bottom
to?
up?
Let's take a look at the bottom up, and we can see here a few things.
That took about 96 seconds. That's a little bit long.
Yep, let's take a look at movie component. So 9 seconds to do ngDo check. What's going on here?
I'm not sure. I don't think that's it. That seems reasonable.
9.5 seconds. It's really reasonable.
Well,
So
we got
let's jump into the code.
one of our viewers, Fergus, called out logging last time, and I see there's a console log there, so that must be it, right?
Yep. I say we get rid of the console log, we rerun the tests, 9 seconds goes away.
Don't even get me
Solved.
started on Fergus, you guys. because,
Solved.
You think? I think that the solution for this is on push. And why is that?
I think the do check is running all the time, right?
Yeah, the do check is running all the time. The problem here, okay, I'm giving you the answer, not Justin, is oh my god, I just shot myself in the leg.
That's perfect.
So the problem here is that we have a movies component, and the movies component is rendering the entire movies in default strategy, and we have a lot
That's
of movies
crazy.
in this page. Not a good idea to do, but it's just the demo to show or to demonstrate something. And the change title is changing, so it's just doing some small stupid string manipulation. It takes so much time, and this is because Angular is doing all the checks on all the movie components, even though it's empty. It's not doing anything. Movie components just some presentation part, which is it doesn't have anything inside of it. So all of those checks are non-relevant. And if I'm doing on push, because if only if props the property or the input will change, then the check will be done on the components that the property changed. So this is the solution. No, not the solution for everything in Angular in performance bottleneck, but a solution to this problem. So we did a process together of how to profile an app, and we saw a few examples, simple examples. In the real world, it won't be such a simple thing, but simple examples that can help you later on understand the big thing here or the big idea here.
So I want to call something out really quick on the console log.
Yeah.
So the console log can be real handy in this scenario. Like, let's say we opened up the bottom up, right? And we saw that do check is the one that's getting hit and called all the time. And let's say it didn't have a console log right now, right? It just had some other logic, right? If after we identify that, if we come in there and throw a console log in there, rerun it in the browser and look at our console output, it can help us identify that, like, oh, that thing is getting called way more than we expected, right? It's like we can now start to identify the number of times it's called and see that, yeah, that's a problem. So for example, like if we have a class, a component class where we have a method inside of it, and we're using that method in our template, right? And Angular's change detection is constantly firing and it's constantly calling our method. We may not visibly see that, but as soon as we go to profile and we throw a console log, we can identify that, wow, that method gets called 20 times and I expected it to just get called once. So I think it's something that we can then leverage also, unless there's some way in the profile tools to also get that kind of information about how many times that do check was called.
There are ways to see how many times the ng do check called.
I think Gil may have a connection issue.
I was like, what? Wait, I was waiting for him to talk again. I thought he was being suspenseful.
An internet supply dramatic pause.
The only way I knew that you weren't all frozen was because Bonnie's eyes were moving. I was like,
Let me check and see. I'll see if we can see if he's.
This happened one time when Jeff Welpley was on, and he didn't know that his internet froze, and he kept on talking for like 15 minutes.
All right. Well, I pinged him, and we'll get an update here. Assuming his connection's up. I mean, if his connection went down, then I guess he won't get my message. But we'll find.
Isn't he fun?
Yeah.
He's such a goofball.
So maybe expanding upon that like concept, right, with the debugging and stuff. And utilizing those tools and the dev tools to kind of find those scenarios and those issues. One of the things I was thinking about was us as developers when we're diving in. Let's say I'm building a new component or I'm working on a component and it's running in this app that has like 40, 50 different other components. And I launch it in the browser and I open up the dev tools to do the profiling of my component that I'm adding. Like, I wonder what happens when there's other components that are causing problems, right? Like, how easy is it for me to, in that experience, get to the ones that I'm working on and kind of avoid the noise or the existing problems that my code, right?
You see, performance problems.
We thought you were just doing like a dramatic pause, and then we realized
it wasn't a dramatic pause. It was internet in my Wi-Fi just died for a few seconds.
did you know that it died, or did you keep going?
I kept going. I'm the Energizer Bunny. I'm just keep on going and going and going. So when I got stopped, or what's the last thing that I said before I went blank?
It was right after I I asked or mentioned the point about throwing the console log in, I think.
Yeah, so throwing the console log can help you in performance or to see the performance in the DevTools, but the DevTools are smarter enough to present you things that aren't working. You saw that they are calculating each and every milliseconds for each and every line, so you can get the hints from the lines themselves, and you don't have to have console log. But console log, once you get into the console and you see that you have a lot of printing or things like that, that can help you identify that you have a problem. You don't know what is the problem, but it might help you identify that you have something that you need to tackle.
So one of the things that we were talking about to fill space while we were waiting for your connection to come back up was
and
mentioning.
I'm sorry for that.
That's totally fine. No worries. Those things happen. No problem. We were talking about the idea that if I'm working on this component, let's say I'm building this movie component, right? But it's running in the app that has several other components. And maybe those haven't been profile tested, right? And I launched it in the browser and I do the profile tools. Like, how do I kind of avoid the noise of, I mean, obviously you want to deal with those other problems, but in this case, I only concerned about the one I'm working on right for this given moment, right? Like, how do I identify that it's mine that's having an issue and not, get through that noise, right?
So you can, this is the idea of establishing a baseline. Okay, you can do some stuff in isolation. You can try, or you can take the component that you're creating, working, and put it in a controlled environment. It doesn't have to be inside the app to work, hopefully, but you can add mocks or data that comes into your component from the outside. There are tools in that, not tools, but there are things that you can do to do that. For example, it's not a testing tool, but from time to time I'm taking the components that I'm building, put them in some my local environment and play with them and try to figure out if they're working as expected. Once you're isolating your component, then you can find performance problems in your component. I know that we are not living in an ideal world that everything can be isolated, but this thing is very important. So once you want to establish a baseline, you should try to figure out how to take your component. If you built it as a dumb component, then it's easy. But if it's a smart component that talks with services or with state and things like that, you will have to manipulate it a little bit with mocks or with stubs and to make it work in isolation, and then check the performance, of course, or try to overload it with tons of data to see if it works as expected.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely like some tooling out there, right, that can allow us to do that. Like when we think about like Storybook. Storybook provides one way where we can have it in isolation and can see that component or stage different scenarios, even have it like with the multiple colors on one stage of a Storybook experience, right? And then we could profile that. But I think we can go even further with that, because when we're talking about profiling, again, the same sort of concept. Even if it's running in Storybook, you still have the overhead of Storybook and its pieces that it's doing, right? So then we could look at something like Angular Playground, which is like Storybook, but it deals with just the component, and it's not really so much of a design system art, collection, but more of just the one component and nothing else around it. And then in that sort of tooling, then you can really get in and say, I know the only thing that's really running is just my component and a little bit of bootstrapping around it. So now maybe that becomes even easier to profile your component and block out the noise.
Yep. Yeah. I must agree with you.
But not only because it's his show.
But not only just the profiling aspect of what you've shown today, but also the different way of thinking of solutions. So going back to the RGB example, is because I don't know about everybody else, but myself, it's, hey, that function looks like it's inefficient, or I may be calling it too many times. And maybe I created a variable, so I cut down the number of calls in half, or what have you there. And sure, that would help a little bit. But to think outside the box and not just, hey, how do I make this thing faster? But are there any other alternatives that would make it so that I don't even need to call this at all? Because obviously, the fastest code is the code that doesn't run. So
I said in the rail model, idle is the best thing,
right?
So to express what you're saying, it's a matter of experience. Where once you put the profiling cycles in the companies, inside of your sprints and everything else, then you start to get some hints about the code that you're writing, and with the experience, for me to find this problem, it will be, I think, much easier than for someone who is not experienced in profiling. But it takes time and it takes practice, like everything else, and then you have a few ideas of how to tackle the problems. Sometimes it's thinking out of the box and throwing some different idea of how to eventually architect the entire thing. This function, the decimal to hex in the demo, it's a function that works. It will do the job, but there are probably some better ideas and better things that can be done. In programming, everything can be done faster and better than what we are doing eventually. So I think it's a matter of experience. So if you have more experience, it will be faster. I won't say easier. Okay, finding some performance bottlenecks can take some time. I can tell you that I wrote some virtual scrolling feature 5 years ago, and it was like hilarious that in some rare occasion things didn't work fast enough, and the client wasn't happy with that. And the problem was, how I implemented some recursion that did the entire thing. And once I changed the code and removed the recursion and started to do some things, because I said to myself, what a silly thing! Why do you want to add to do recursions in virtual scrolling? And this was a problem, and I solved it, and it worked. So it's something that you need to experience in order to have some data or to understand how to test and measure and then tune up the app. It's not an easy, like a magic wand that you're waving and everything is solved.
Right. I think another aspect too of that, of the whole thing we talked about with the CSS solution and stuff, is keeping in mind that pixel pipeline and the environment that we're working in of the web, right? And the browser and how the browser renders and works with our apps. Because when we think about that and we can identify and say, look, what is some of the most efficient things that we can do to make things happen in the browser for us? And that's CSS and HTML that goes along with that CSS. It's natively designed to do that and work with that, right? And then the JavaScript is this additional stuff that we're adding into there. So understanding the environment that we're building for and understanding how can we solve that with CSS first, right? That's going to be the most efficient. And then do we move into logic or JavaScript and that sort of thing? And so I think like the example we had earlier was a great example of that, where the solution lied in CSS and it was really straightforward. And we leveraged the platform and the environment that we're in and its native stuff that it does to render before we move into, say, a programmatic JavaScript type of solution for that.
Yeah, and more than that, for example, it is very popular today to work with virtual DOM. And not the browser has a lot of optimizations regarding to reflows and repaints. So sometimes virtual DOM will do like super fast performance, and in some occasions it won't. So as you said, it depends on you understand the environment and how to use the environment as it was supposed to being used. So yeah, I can cope with that, and I think that it's something that I'm always telling junior developers. You can't go and drive a car without looking inside its engine. Okay, don't use Angular without understanding what is doing beneath. So um, learning the environment that you run is a very essential thing in order to understand how to tackle the performance problems later on.
I think that's really good. That goes without saying, because I do so much consulting, and one of the biggest things that I see a lot of people making mistakes on, other than RxJS, is performance. Because Angular by itself, and I always tell people this, Angular by itself is wicked fast. And if you are writing an Angular app that's slow, there's something you're doing wrong, because you can do a lot. I mean, Angular is so powerful and it's so fast. And I just see so many people making little mistakes. And here's the thing. You can make a little mistake when you're learning it, and I made many mistakes when I was learning it, and I got away with it. But you don't really, the performance doesn't really start to hurt you until you start scaling. And once you start having, like if you have an ngFor and you have a few things in your ngFor, you're going to get away with even if you're screwing it up. But then when you have like 5,000 things in your ngFor, then all of a sudden you see all these problems. But you've been doing it wrong since you learned Angular, but it didn't really catch you, right? It catches up with you, and then you've got all this huge, massive application that's very, very slow, and it happens all the time.
Can you share my screen for a second?
Yeah, I don't see it on there yet, though. Available for me to share.
I will make something shareable in a second. This is the slide that was missing at the end of what I wanted to say. Exactly what Bonnie said.
I'm here for you, Gil.
Don't wait that the users will complain. You need to solve the problems today, because this is you can stop sharing. This
is a training issue.
Yeah, it's a training issue. It's something that you can train yourself to do, and this is what I'm trying to say in the talks that I'm giving about profiling and performance and things like that. You have the knowledge, you have the tools. You just need to use them more often in order to, in the end, to ship better things, better components, better apps, better performing apps, and etc. So the idea of waiting that the users will complain that something is sluggish, and I have a lot of GIFs with things that look very, very sophisticated and like, oh my god, it's quirking. What's the page is moving like, or some things like that, and these things don't happen on our computers, because we as developers have laptops which are monsters, or we have desktops which are very big monsters that can handle everything, and we ship the app, and the app is coming is going to work on some mobile phone in 3G, and God bless you, and it's going to work on a mobile phone on 3G and etc., and it will perform so bad that the users will like scream at you, what have you done? So this is why it's so important for us to test the things that we are doing, not only unit test things, but profile things before we ship things out and into productions. Non-happy users are the kind of users that you don't want.
Well said. Well said. All right. Well, we're at the top of the hour, so we better wrap this one up. Any last things on profile? I think that was elegant, perfect ending. But is there anything else that you need to throw in, or we good? Get
No,
to some picks.
I'm done.
All right, let's do some picks and then we'll wrap it up. All right. So first, our panelists. Any of our panelists, raise your hand. I can see you if you have picks. Oh, none of our panelists have picks. All right. All right. Well, Alyssa has a pick. Okay.
So I just wanted to say, all of us know or should know that Angular 9 was pushed till after the holidays. And I think it's kind of like a nice nod to what we should be doing this season, which is focusing on family and friends, right? And I think I think that whether it's, for my family, we're doing this epic board game night that I'm really looking forward to. We keep score, go through all these different board games, and whoever wins each game, you add to your tally, and there's one all-time winner. So, but whatever it is you do with family or friends, just soak that up this holiday season and come back recharged. So.
I love that pick. And we have a week or two off from Angular Air, don't we, Justin?
Yeah, I think we don't have any episodes till the start of the new year. So
we have Ilya coming on in January, who is another goofball who I really love.
For sure. All right, our guest, Gil. How about your picks?
First of all, I want to mention that Shai didn't came, so I will give him a hug once I meet him and next time.
Give him a hug and a kiss, a big old kiss, because this is Shai Resnick. He kisses everybody. Don't worry, we're gonna get away with this.
Okay, and my pick is go and see The Rise of Skywalker. You saw me showing the demo with the Star Wars. I'm a big fan. I know that I want to go and see that movie as soon as possible. And so this is going to be my pick. No spoilers or anything because I didn't see it, but go and see it because this is
it out for you? Is it out for you already? Because it doesn't come out until I think
today. It's out
Friday or Saturday. Oh, okay. So it doesn't launch in the US until Friday or Saturday.
I think today tomorrow it's going to launch. Not today, and I hope to catch it as soon as possible before the spoilers.
I agree with that pick. Yeah, it opens tomorrow for us here, and I don't think I'll be able to sleep tonight. So yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, Gil, hey, thanks a ton for coming on, for sharing your time and sharing this content. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
With pleasure. Thank you for hosting me. It was very, very nice of you, and I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. All right. That's a wrap. Have a good one, everyone. Have a good holiday season, and we'll catch everybody on the new year. Later.